depends on the object. Actually, you know what? Let's just take a look at that, because I know where you're coming from having an issue, and I kind of know why. So what I'm going to do is like here, if I run this, the output is a string, right? You see that in the help on the side. That's super easy. We see that all the time. Now, if you take an object like get logged on user and like this, now this one will return a list of users. You can see here the type is collection. It is not a single row, it's a list of users. Because the thing is, multiple users could be logged on at the same time with a suspended session. You see that more on servers, but it could happen. So that is why this object will output a list and not a single row. And a lot of objects do that, like this one here. User that did not log on in the last X days, that is a collection again, it's not a string. So by having this as a string, you can do a few things to it. So if we clear that out and start, right? Actually, yeah, let's keep that for now. So if it's only one thing, super easy. I do like example an if, and when you go to link it, it's going to offer you that object and those variables. Result is always a 0 or 1. That's a did it work, did it break. Result string is going to be some debug info. You don't need to care about that. And then conditional will actually be the answer or whatever the output is. So that is what you would link and do something with, right? But if I go and I move this object down and I say I want to link to my get logged on users, you'll see here that variable is not there because it's a list. So what you need to do is one of two things. You need to say use the collection contain. You can get a row count. Those two will do that. So I can say how many people are logged in. So I can say get logged on users list. That's going to give me a count. Or does that collection list, the variable will be username in my case, contain, let's say, Mark. And I can say exact or partial. I'm going to say partial in this case. And when I run this, now these objects are going to go through. If I can make this bigger, there you go. This is going to go through and say who is logged in. There's only one in my case. It's myself. Duh. Now it's saying here, this is my collection. Is there someone called Mark logged in? Yes, it's Mark A, Mark Andre. So that makes sense. Yes. And then here, how many people are logged in? It's 1. Now you can use this output to do whatever you need to do because it told you somebody that matches this name is logged in. So in the case where you want to say, is there someone called administrator logged in? Because you don't want people to use administrator. You can actually get a pop-up and a warning about that as a custom service. That would be a way to do it, Greg. This one will just tell you how many people are logged in. On the case of a Citrix servers, this would be useful because you can say, okay, or a terminal server on RDS, you could get a warning if there's too many people logged in at the same time, which is usually an indication that either the server is under spec or you have a lot of disconnected sessions. Either or, there's something you may want to monitor. If your limit for licensing is 25 and you're at 20, this would warn you like, hey, you're at 20, you're at 80%, right? And that would get you that. Now, if you want to go through the list and do something based on that or concatenate it into something, you would then go with a for each. Now, if I'm going too quickly, let me know. I'm trying to not go super fast, but at the same time, it's a lot of things to kind of cover. So I'm kind of doing my best at the same time. So what you would do is the for each allows you to basically loop through each item in the list and do something. I'd say take my user list and say, actually what, we'll switch the local logged on user to local users. Yeah, like that. Just the reason I'm going to switch to this really, oh, it freaked out. Okay. The reason I switched to this really is on purpose. It's just so that, yeah, whatever. Is so that this one will have multiple accounts on my machine because I keep doing stuff with it. So I'm going to say get that list of users. And now if I want to concatenate it into a usable list, what I would then do is then if I want to output it to a custom service, for example, as a list, or if I want to loop through each and say like, hey, when you find this, do something like that, you can do it with a for each. And the way to loop through would be pretty simple at this point. If I do log and I put that here and I link that to my for each username, it's going to output each user found on my machine. And as you can see, it loops through each of them. So it said, here's a list of all the users on my machine. Then it says the first one is administrator, the second one is this, and it loops through each of them one at a time. And that is how this is really allowing me to go through each account to do an action of my choice. Now, if I would like to basically concatenate that into a big list, let's assume that's what I want to do. I would go to input, global variable. Global variables are reusable variables in the scope of automation that you can loop over yourself and do stuff with. So I'm gonna say add, and I'm gonna say G for global, that's just my naming, and then users. That's a string, and then no users found. I always put a default value. That's a preference. It is just so that when you have an empty variable, let's say you don't find anything, it's not gonna loop through, and when you output it, that's gonna output nothing, and that is not ideal. So what I'm gonna do is say for each, then put an if else. If my global variable users is equal to no users found. So it's basically my first user. I have an object called global variable assignment, and I'm going to put on each side of this. On the other side, I'm going to come back to that in a second. I'm going to put this object. All right, so here, if it is my first user, I want to overwrite that no users with my first one. So I'm going to say take my users list and take my for each username. So the first time around, it's going to erase that from the variable and replace it with this. The second time, I want to concatenate this. So I'm going to basically go like this, like that. And then I'm going to say concatenate these two things. The first thing will be my global variable, and the second one will be my for each username. So it's going to basically loop through and concatenate, and then it's going to save my global variable with that updated value. Now, if you've seen this in my bootcamp before, that is because this is one of the labs. This is one of the things that we cover. But I just figured I'd still cover it since that's a very good question. And then I would say do OK. And then this goes over itself like that. And basically now you can see it made a global variable with 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 accounts that are just concatenated with a dash. I could have put a semicolon, whatever, but that's how I chose to do it. And then finally, if you want to build that into a monitoring or reuse, you would do output, add, and then say out users, list of users found on that machine, and then list output from my, like that. And this now will allow me to get that list of users out as an output that I can then use in a custom service. I can say if that list contains so-and-so, or if it does not contain so-and-so, go into a failed state, and so on and so on. So that gives you that visibility now.